In 2025, we've had some great movies so far. Most people knew they were in safe hands with the likes of Sinners, Predator, Killer of Killers, Mickey 17, and so on. Yet these movies all defied the odds and surprised the hell out of just about everyone. So let's take a look. I'm Adam, this is Whatculture, and here are awesome recent movies nobody saw coming. Freaky Tales. Freaky Tales is an action comedy anthology film from filmmakers Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck of Half Nelson and Captain Marvel fame, with a strong ensemble cast led by Pedro Pascal and Ben Mendelsohn, and hell, there's even a freaking cameo by Tom Hanks. The film actually premiered at the Sundance Film Festival back in January 2024 to good but not glowing reviews, after which it spent more than 14 months in release limbo, despite being acquired by Lionsgate ahead of its premiere. Freaky Tales bizarrely played at no other festivals after Sundance and was ultimately sent out to die in less than 400 US cinemas, with minimal marketing before being dumped equally quietly on streaming. And yet, Boden and Fleck's film is one of the wildest and most unique movies of the year. A bonkers, blood-soaked Bay Area tableau about revenge, redemption, and music. But it flew so far below the radar when it initially released back in April that one could easily assume Lionsgate was basically embarrassed by it for some reason. It's absolutely baffling. The Legend of Ochi. You know, it really sucks to say that few films have been more poorly served by their distributor in recent memory than The Legend of Ochi, a wonderfully charming fantasy adventure film in which a girl attempts to reunite the adorable titular creature with its family. Even with a well-received premiere at Sundance back in January, A24 sent it into barely 1,000 US cinemas with a near non-existent marketing campaign, enough that even fans of old-school handcrafted dark fantasy films had no idea it was coming out. The Legend of Ochi ultimately grossed just $4.7 million against a $10 million budget on theatrical release, though its esteem has begun to grow since it was recently released on streaming, where audiences appear to be finally discovering its charms. The sheer gorgeous craft on display and the strength of its performances ensure that The Legend of Ochi will almost certainly endure as a beloved cult movie in the years that follow, even though the low-key marketing means that most haven't heard of it yet. Dangerous Animals. Now, it's safe to say that shark movies don't exactly have the strongest reputation outside of Jaws, with most of them settling for being trashy B-movies that might qualify as guilty pleasures at best. And that absolutely looked like the case for Dangerous Animals, which opted to collide the shark movie with a serial killer flick for added pulpy value, with Jai Courtney playing the bloodthirsty maniac at its core. This felt like a movie that quietly came out and went without much mention, and yet it ended up receiving vocally positive reviews from the horror sphere and also general critics for its tension, atmosphere, and especially Courtney's career-best performance. This is a cut far above the average as both shark movies and serial killer flicks go. A superbly edited, gut-wrenchingly intense, and at times darkly hilarious romp that presents one of the most loathsome antagonists in recent horror history. Though it hardly lit up the box office, expect Dangerous Animals to have a long life as a cult classic on streaming. It absolutely deserves it. Black Bag. Now, talk about a movie that was done no credit whatsoever by its marketing. Steven Soderbergh's new spy thriller, Black Bag, was more or less sent out to die on its week of release back in March, arriving with only the most limited of marketing campaigns, despite starring the likes of Cate Blanchett, Michael Fassbender, Naomi Harris, Regé-Jean Page, and Pierce Brosnan. The general lack of hype seemed to suggest that Black Bag would be a middling, minor entry into Soderbergh's filmography, despite the alluring star wattage, and yet ultimately turned out to be one of the best reviewed films of the year so far. A drum-tight 94-minute thriller that's low on locations but high on witty wordplay and anxious tension. Black Bag makes terrific use of its game cast throughout, once again proving Soderbergh to be one of the most dynamic and reliable filmmakers working today. Sadly, Black Bag flopped at the box office, in part because of its hefty $60 million budget, and in part because audiences just can't be coaxed out of their homes to come and watch a modest genre movie like this on the big screen anymore. Rebel Ridge. It's not unfair to say that the pre-release sentiment surrounding Jeremy Saulnier's new film Rebel Ridge well, it wasn't great. It all started with original star John Boyega's sudden departure from the project after weeks of shooting, citing dissatisfaction with the film's script. This caused production to be shut down for almost an entire year, before it restarted with Aaron Pierre replacing Boyega. Now couple this with Saulnier's previous film, 2018's Hold the Dark, being something of a disappointment, and his early exit from working on the third season of True Detective, and I guess some suspected that the filmmaker had basically fallen off. It certainly didn't help that Rebel Ridge spent roughly 2 years in post-production despite featuring minimal VFX elements, and was then rather quietly released on Netflix last September. None of this suggested that Saulnier had a banger on his hands closer to his earlier work like Blue Ruin or Green Room, but what a pleasant surprise it was to see the film receive rave reviews from critics. Between Saulnier's taut direction and Aaron Pierre's superb, even star-making performance in the lead role, Rebel Ridge clawed its way out of a potentially disastrous production and came up smelling of roses. Flow. Alright, this is one of my favorites now, and though the Latvian animated film Flow has received nearly universal acclaim since its premiere at the Cannes Film Festival back in May 2024, nothing about this wordless, low-budget animation created entirely in the free open-source software Blender suggested it'd make a dent in the mainstream. But Flow's rep only grew throughout 2024 as it played in more film festivals and became not only a serious award contender, but a genuine must-see animated film on a wider level. Ultimately, Flow went on to win the Best Animated Film Oscar earlier this year, absolutely deserved, triumphing over decidedly more high-profile competitions such as Inside Out 2, The Wild Robot, and Wallace & Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul. And beyond that, it also ended up grossing more than 50 million euros at the global box office, a frankly astonishing return on investment for a dialogue-free animated film made for just 3.5 million euros. Back when Flow premiered at Cannes, few could have ever expected that it would break out of the festival bubble and become a bona fide hit in its own right. It's absolutely worth it, check it out. The Surfer. Alright, when you hear that Nicolas Cage is starring in a psychological thriller as a down-on-his-luck guy who starts losing his mind while battling an Australian surfing cult, wow, you couldn't be blamed for expecting something far more away from the more acclaimed entries in Cage's recent filmography. I mean, I'm talking about Pig, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, Dream Scenario, and of course, Longlegs. But credit where it's due, The Surfer is an absolute blast. This isn't some lousy B-movie cynically trying to cash in on the cult of Cage. It's a wonderfully unhinged, kaleidoscopic thriller which tosses the action into a quite literal sea of toxic masculinity and tasks him with paddling his way out. Now, obviously indebted to classic films like Wake in Fright and The Swimmer, The Surfer is a refreshing plunge down a very twisted rabbit hole, making the most of its unexplored Aussie setting and giving Cage yet another opportunity, like he needs the encouragement right now, to go absolutely buck wild. Bridget Jones mad about the boy. Alright, now who among us expected the fourth Bridget Jones movie to make it on any lists about awesome movies? Anyone? Anyone? The series felt like it tied itself off just fine with 2016's Bridget Jones's Baby, and many fans were immediately concerned when the fourth film was confirmed to be adapting the highly divisive third novel Mad About the Boy. It all came down to the fact that this story kicks off with the death of Bridget's much-loved husband Mark Darcy, an undeniable bummer which many felt robbed the third novel of the series' characteristic charm. And yet, as a film, Mad About the Boy is actually a surprisingly effective tale about grief. Sure, it's less funny and frothy than the previous three films, but it still overflows with charm thanks to the central performances, especially from Renee Zellweger, before seemingly closing the book on Bridget's story once and for all. Considering how easily this sequel could have been a miserable capper to the franchise, it's actually quite impressive how nimbly it pivoted into a happy, sad finale. Deep Cover. Deep Cover is a new action comedy that seemingly came out of nowhere, landing on Amazon Prime in early June with only a minimal marketing push, despite rocking an enviable ensemble cast including Bryce Dallas Howard, Orlando Bloom, Nick Mohammed, Paddy Considine, Ian McShane, and Sean Bean. If Amazon were burying it, then why expect anything good from it then, right? Except, Deep Cover released 2 well-earned rave reviews from many prominent critics, citing its fun twist on the buddy cop genre, sharp script, and the terrific performances of its central trio. Deep Cover wasn't just okay for a streaming comedy, it was a genuinely laugh-out-loud funny romp that proved itself absolutely worthy of the big screen release it sadly never got. While the labored premise of a trio of improv comics becoming undercover operatives for the police might invite some eye roll, sure, but thanks to a self-aware script that revels in its own silliness, this is one of the most purely fun movies to release in 2025 so far. Who could have predicted that? The Order. Though it was well received on the festival circuit last year, this new crime thriller from Justin Kurzel sank like a stone at the box office, grossing barely $2 million worldwide. Even though The Order starred the ever-reliable Jude Law and Nicholas Hoult as an FBI agent and white supremacist cult leader respectively, it gained no traction whatsoever on its opening weekend, and seemed destined to be forgotten in the content abyss once it hit streaming. However, The Order has become an unexpected hit on both Amazon Prime and Hulu in recent months, topping the charts on each platform long after most assumed it would have no staying power whatsoever. And it's an absolutely deserved fate for a brilliantly crafted thriller powered by some of Law's and Holt's best work in recent years. It may not be reinventing the wheel, but there's something to be said about films that do the familiar with tremendous skill. And that's absolutely true of The Order. Go and check it out.